Okay, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move.
No? Want to share? Second, all in favor? Okay, no, please note that no members of the public are present and Dr. Rachel Wisniewski is absent. Other board members and present are Dr. Gwas, Mr. Stripinger, and Mr. Smith.
Hello,
And of course,
Rachel? Oh, are you calling in for the meeting? Okay, hold on, let me put you on a speaker.
strike that. Dr. Wisniewski is with us. We'll have a momentary
Rachel?
pause in the action here while we set her up.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay?
yes.
All right. Rachel, you missed the Pledge of Allegiance. Next we have approval of the minutes from June 17th.
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay. Second, I second. All in favor? Thank you.
Rachel?
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Okay, no public comments. All right, discussion of new policies. If this is a list of items that were either passed in a motion before the board or that another committee has asked us to discuss a policy for. But before we begin that, I'd just like to clear up a concept that popped up last week. I talked to Tricia prior to our meeting Friday night, and the upshot of the conversation was, contrary to some people's opinion, nothing, at least with this committee, nothing can die in committee. Some members were going along the route that legislators take, where if a chairman of a committee wants to bottle something up, it just doesn't have it discussed, or it refuses to have a vote taken. We have two products here. We have the whole manual, and that's a proposal. And when we're done, we'll take a vote on the new manual that we've put together and recommend yes or no to the board. However, the old one still exists, so anybody on the board has to go to the board, and anybody on the board has a right to say, wait a minute, I'd like to see how you did this on this particular policy, and then there'll be an up or down vote. Now, on these, I just want to emphasize that I have no, well, we're going to discuss whether we think it's a good idea or not, but the point is that if tonight we vote no on any of these, they're still going to go to the board with a no recommendation, but the board has every right to overrule the committee's suggestion and adopt it. That is what prevents a committee from going rogue. Okay, everybody clear on that? We serve the board by examining and vetting different proposals, and then we take a vote to see if we think it's a good idea. But ultimately, the decision belongs to the full board as to whether or not it's adopted as policy. Unless there's been a motion, like the operation of schools and the contract of 0.01% of the combined budgets, yes.
So I agree with the philosophy that, yes, the committee is doing the work for the board, and whatever the issue is gonna come to the board. The committee is not the ultimate judge on the decision-making. However, you have to think of the process, and if the process is the committee has had a discussion and dismissed this, or wants to bring this forward, or dismiss that, and wants to, you can't, I don't think you can, how should I say this, practically bring to the board all of that in and out, you can't. Because
Okay.
then the whole board should be doing
Yeah.
it, because
I'm
you're
not
bringing
ta-
all of that
yeah.
back.
I'm
So
not-
that's the fine line I see as problematic. So are you gonna have the committees bring forward the inaction? Because that's what you're getting into if you're gonna do that. And that's what I see. I know there was dialogue in the emails about Trish's committee not recommending that, IT study for 55,000 or whatever. But see, that's where you're gonna, okay, so now every time, okay, you guys today decided we're not changing this. Well, now you gotta bring that to the board to say, that's, you've gotta make it so it's a working, and a benefit to the board, not you guys, I mean, what's the point of a committee if you're gonna,
Yeah.
every action you do is now gonna go to the board, so that doesn't work. Okay.
My point is that what we do is we advise the board, we don't direct the board. And if the board can't take a look at what we've decided no on, that another committee has proposed as a policy, we've taken away the board's ability to pass judgment on it. Now, hopefully, they'll take our advice under heavy consideration, but the rank and file, you may disagree with the decision that we make, okay, on whether to recommend or not. And you have every right, there has to be a way for you to say, I think that I object to the committee's recommendation on this, and I think we ought to do the opposite. See? Otherwise, if Mel and I went, no tonight, and you never heard another thing about it, we will have preempted the board's ability to take a whack at it. So it doesn't take away all the conversation, and we never have to bring our discussion to the full board, just our recommendation. And the board has to, I trust that the academics committee and the finance committee have had thorough discussions and have vetted it, so that I would be more than likely to go along with whatever recommendation they make, but I want the opportunity to probe it. So if discussion remains, but it's only 20% of what it used to be, okay, then I think it's been beneficial.
You go ahead, because you're on the committee.
Well, I argued your argument.
Yeah,
I looked at John's point, and I agree with both. I mean, you're saying you can't vet everything. You can't go back and look at every decision we make. Some of those decisions, but John is saying the belief in the board and the committee is the thing that's gonna cut the vetting down. If we recommend no, then a large percentage of the time, you're gonna go with no, because supposedly we've done our due diligence. But if there's something that comes up that does need discussion, have some some concern, then the board does need to make the decision, because we're only 3 people. It's 8 other people there.
You see, because the board can't, the
Yeah.
committee can't decide anything. The committee
Right.
can only recommend yes or no.
Right, I agree with it after reflecting on it.
I think, David.
There was some
go ahead.
wisdom.
As you know, I think committees should be working on things that the board wants them to work on. If the board has asked you to work on something, then you're obligated to get back to the board and say, we did look at that. If we're putting things on our agendas which did not come through the board, we have a different
Exactly where we're
story.
gonna stay.
We have a different story there.
Okay,
But
let me-
if it comes from the board, we have to go back to the board and
I hear
say,
you.
we don't think it should be.
the
We looked
problem
at it.
is, if one member or a committee has to go to the board to get it to this board, that means it goes through the officers to get on the agenda, and the officers control the flow of what goes into the board. So if the officers don't like what's being suggested as a policy, they can make it die in the agenda setting process.
Well, the committees go to the board and say, we should have a policy on such and
But it's
such.
gotta get on the agenda before that can happen.
Everything has to get on the agenda, I mean.
Yeah, but a committee
Rachel, you still there?
can't be expected to go in July to the office, and the
Rachel?
offices can take until October or November to get it on the agenda for a meeting.
Well, I think the downside of
And that's giving
committees,
3 out of the 11 more sway.
committees going rogue is a bigger danger.
I think, well, one thing that would or should cover a lot of this in terms of generality is our approving of a scope for the committee. So, I mean, but that's just general, and a lot of stuff specifically under that scope is discussed that, and I think it's a matter of discretion. And that's why I think John's point about this audit is a good one. We need to bring that to the board. Although, you know, we've looked at it and said, we don't think so, but the board might think otherwise, particularly in this day and time. So some things, you know, it'd be up to us to decide, we need to take this to the board, because it's too much of a deal for us to just say no and put you on the side. Some of the policy things, there's so much stuff, we can't take every little thing to the board. And then they said, you know, we said no, and we just said, I mean, the next one, why just scrape that? They have to, yeah, that's too much. But I think, yeah, some things we have to decide on, the committee's gotta be at least cerebral enough to say, hey, this is bigger than us.
Rachel, do you have anything in input?
I don't right now.
She said she doesn't.
Okay, let me give an example. Number 4, the procurement, the finance committee has asked that the procurement code be reviewed and updated every 3 years. Now, if they have to come to the board to get us to look at that, they have to convince the whole board that the procurement code should possibly be reviewed every 3 years. So then we write a policy and then bring the policy back for approval. That's redundant, because they have to spend all the time getting the board vote to get it into this committee.
I thought that, Mr. Don, I could be mistaken, but I thought they reviewed that procurement code every year.
Pardon me? That hasn't been looked at since 2012.
That's what's stamped on
Yeah.
the cover page.
Good.
Yeah, seriously.
You know, I don't
Sorry,
remember,
that's,
I don't remember the committee reporting on that. Did the finance committee come to the board in their report and say, we
No, that's the
we
problem.
recommend a procurement every 3 years?
That's the particular point John's saying. I
Right.
mean,
No,
that's
they-
what she's saying.
Right.
And do we know the full committee asked for that? How did you learn about it?
they asked me at their meeting.
Who's that?
Oh, at their meeting? Okay, so they voted and said
Yeah.
that they wanted it?
Yeah.
See, I
So-
just,
Why should they have to convince the board to have us consider it, and then we have to go through considering it and bring it back to the board? It's,
because they report to the board.
I agree 100% with you.
Just the discussion we had last time, remember? Same kind of discussion on whether we wanna go in silo. And I said this kind of thing would lead to that kind of direction. Now, we're vetting what the board's business is, and just 3 of us vetting what the board's business is instead of 11 of us.
we got one meeting in July 9th, so let's say that the finance committee, or the operations committee, comes up with something that they want this committee to look at. And they missed the agenda setting for the 9th. They've gotta wait till what? When's the first meeting in August?
The 6th, August 6th.
Okay, that's not very efficient. The guarantee is that nothing can die in committee.
I personally, I don't really have a problem with it. I mean,
Which you're talking about.
just from committee to, because at the end of the day, committee chairs, we said we trust them all, we put them there to be chairs. Then apparently, then they should be they should be just as efficient enough to be a chair as the chair of the board, and all of them are still chairs. So I mean, if we say if they have an issue that they're bringing up, hoping and believing that the issue would be something that the full board would want to know, and if it's not, then it would be told to them. Say, look, there's something the full board is not really, looking into, obligated to look into, and hopefully each committee member would have enough Kufa enough more compass that okay, this is something personal. We get off on a personal thing. We may need to come back and refocus, and this is what it aligns with the board goals and what we're doing, and so on. So I mean, I'm just,
Just one correction, we didn't vote the chairs in.
Huh?
Chairs got appointed.
Yeah, exactly, so that's one.
Chairs got appointed, we didn't vote them in.
Oh,
So
but
you just
aspect
pointed
of
out,
this.
John, that you don't trust the 3 officers to necessarily put it on the agenda in a timely manner, you've just stated that. I see that as problematic, but the whole idea of committees is that they're doing the work of the board, and the board has not brought this to your committee, so I see that as a problem, I really do. And I know you're thinking that, this increases efficiency, but that's not your decision-making, it's the board's decision. Once beyond you've decided your scope, and we've said what, is it within your scope, if you're gonna bring other things forward, it has to go through the board. You may be wasting, your entire meeting on this, nobody wants this, the 3 people on the, whatever finance committee want it, but nobody else wants it, I mean, you have to, and you're assuming you're assuming the negative with the officers. I can tell you, we bend over backwards to why are meetings so long? Because we put everything we possibly can on the meeting. It's not we're trying to wait till October, we're trying to do it in a structured, thoughtful, productive way. So I take issue with what you said, and I'm mistaken.
Okay, how about if the presentation of the board can be made during a committee chair report rather than as a business agenda item? And that
No, you're bypassing
every
approval, board
agenda,
approval.
every agenda has a committee report to it.
You're bypassing board approval.
That means that every 2 weeks, a committee chair can go to the board with a proposal to send an idea to the policy committee.
And you need a vote on it then.
Huh?
You need to have a vote.
Yeah.
If you say everything has to be voted for board approval, you can't do it without a vote. And I'll tell you, we'll be at each meeting for 6 hours a night if we have committees every single meeting. We're trying to do it so we're not there for 6 hours, and that's why we decided this month since we had the referendum and the budget, to have the committees, and all of them are reporting tomorrow at the second meeting. So if you now have committee meetings committee reports and votes every meeting, we're having 6-hour meetings, and we're trying to streamline it, but we gotta do our work,
But on the other hand, Sean's original concept is streamlining it, and if it's and when you look at the numbers, talking 11, right? If that is recommended by another committee, that's 3 people there, and if this committee, another different committee vets it, possibly that's up to 5, even if there's a duplicate rep on both committees. That's up to 5, so it's getting a good percentage of the people understanding and knowing that this is being vetted. And it still has to be approved by the board. Whatever is
I think
vetted and
this-
decided.
I think the solution is we take it to the board as to how this is gonna be solved. I think that's only fair.
Okay. That's fair.
That's fair. I don't think you should
Think
be
so.
deciding how the committees are gonna run. I think the
Yeah.
whole board
Oh,
should
yeah,
decide.
yeah, I think
I think that's the
fair.
fair,
That's why we had
Thing to
that
do.
dialogue,
yeah.
that give and take.
All right, so when will it be on an agenda to decide how the committees?
Well, our next,
July 9th?
meeting, I can't promise you that it'll be right there. I don't know what the other topics are off the top of my head, but I think we'd like to make it, priority. I think that's very reasonable.
I have a question.
Yes, it's not, the world's not gonna end if we don't have this decided right away.
But I think, yeah.
Well, my question is, right now, what is the what is the what is in writing for the committees to do at this point in time right now?
Policy 3.2.
Yeah,
board
exactly.
committees.
That you have to do the work of the board, so it's the board that decides what work you do.
So it's
Once, yeah, and actually, that's what I got right here.
right. So it says
It says, the 2.5 says, no board committee may speak or act for the board except when formally and expressly given such authority.
okay. So maybe.
Six.
So maybe I guess maybe we just need to dig into that and maybe break the process down and what's the expectation of that. Maybe that's something that that's something that as a full board we may need to revisit.
So theoretically, we could have a 30-second process where David comes in and says, I would like to have, to the board, I would like to have the policy committee look at blah, 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 blah. And all in favor? Yeah. That's all
Yeah.
it might take. Okay?
Right.
So, as long as we don't have a bottleneck about them getting on the agendas, I think that's a pretty workable solution. Okay? So, the question becomes, do we wanna take all these and put them to the board?
I thought you said some of them had already gone to the board.
Some of them are only through on a motion, and they have to be codified with 3 readings to become a policy. They don't become a policy automatically. They have the weight of policy, but they're not policy.
So which ones are those? Have you marked them?
So,
Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6 has, I think.
6 has been through the board.
This was a motion.
7
Yes, you're
has
right,
been
2
through
was
the board.
also.
There was a
2.
motion, this was
8
a
has been through the board.
recommendation from the
One at a time,
old finance
please.
committee.
Go ahead.
One at a time. 6, 7, and 8 have been through the board. That's all. So that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
2, 6,
Yes.
7, and 8.
5, 9, and 10.
Yeah, I say 2, 6, 7, 8, that's 2.
6,
They said 2, 6, 7, and 8, John. They said 2 was at the board too.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
2.
2 was.
So you got 6, 7.
So we could vote on these tonight.
10 is already, 10, you get that every month anyway. You get that at the first meeting.
But to take it back, you take it back from us, don't you?
It is collected because it is, has employees' contract levels and information and stuff. But you do get this, you get this every month.
Yes, but there could be a modification made to the report to take any confidential information out of it, so that we know historically when a person has started or ended, okay? Like Pernice getting honored in 2 annual retirement ceremonies. I didn't think you could retire more than once.
His name was, but he didn't get honored twice.
He was, June of 18, June of 2018 and June of 2019. Yes, David?
So what committee did number 10 come from? What committee did number 10 come from?
That was mentioned, it was mentioned at a finance committee meeting. It's not strictly within their scope, okay? I'll give you that.
Yeah, that's why I asked before if the full committee voted on something.
There you go, yeah.
And I don't
Unless
think
they
you're,
didn't understand.
you're right about Anthony Pernice, because I personally know exactly the day he retired. I personally know what day Mr. Pernice retired, and I will not reveal it because it's some professional confidential information, but
Okay,
June 2018 was not when he retired, I can tell you that.
all right, so I will send out a memo to the appropriate committees, okay? On anything we haven't checked off, that they need to put in their report, a request for the board to approve the policy committee to work on it, correct? And then 2, 6, 7, and 8 is a pro forma exercise where the board has approved a motion, and we just gotta ratify the language of the policy to propose to the board. I'm trying to show you that it's roundabout. Yes,
So 8 is not correct, the language. The chair of the board will publish a monthly list of all documents signed in the board's name. Definitely, that's not
That
the
wasn't the motion.
No.
Correct.
That was
There
not
wasn't-
motion.
It's only outside documents.
That's not the motion, number 8 is wrong.
I'm not saying that this is the correct language.
Oh,
It-
well, I thought
It's
that's
a,
what you were
it's
giving
a,
us, new
it's
policy
a
request.
menu of ideas, topics, requests,
Well,
okay?
number 8 is wrong, I'll tell you that.
Okay,
You can't change the wording of a motion. Right. This is passed by the board, so I'm not sure what you do except put it in the right section of the policy manual.
Right, and I don't think it needs to be read.
the quality of all our motions are really not of policy caliber, and you know that. All right, we have to examine them to see if they cover all the bases.
I'd be real reluctant to have you three change any of the wording
David,
in one of
you
my
get
motions.
a chance to say yes or no.
I do understand that.
We're not deciding anything
I just
here.
don't want you wasting my time to say yes or no. You can't change the wording of a motion. And you can't change the intent of it. You can have,
Can amend it, right?
you could say there's a legal problem with it or something.
All right,
So I don't understand. how much
I'll
work
agree
it
to
is.
disagree with you, okay? And Melvin and I will take a vote on it. And
Well,
Rich,
Rachel's here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what are we voting on?
hmm?
What are we voting on?
Okay. Do we wanna take all of these? Let's take 2, 6, 7, and 8, and see if the language is, see what the language in the motion says about, and whether the language in the motion is adaptable to the language of policy,
Okay.
okay?
We can go
Can we
with
do that?
Rachel, do you know the document that he's talking about?
That's not a good word to say.
No, I don't.
It's an email that John sent you,
Oh, yeah, I got that, the email from Thursday.
believe it's
Yeah.
new policy request.
Yeah,
That's the document we're working from.
Yeah, I've got that right here.
Okay,
I was sure you were talking about something else.
you know, that's the document we're working from.
Okay.
She's caught up.
it. Go ahead, Tom. Charlie, what's your,
okay. So, let's take a look at all communications between the South Carolina Department of Ed and the district be sent to the board by the superintendent. Was there anything in the motion that is not in this statement that should be included? Because we don't have to copy the motion into the language of the policy. We're passing a policy to codify the will of the board. And if there's a semantics change, so be it. People don't have to vote.
If you change the wording of any motion, I guarantee you, I'm not gonna vote for any changes. You don't have the power to change the wording of a motion. You don't have that power. The board doesn't have that power unless they make a new motion.
The policy can supersede a motion.
No, we can't.
Okay, that's it.
That's the basic issue we have.
Yeah,
Policy concocted by a committee cannot supersede a motion.
okay, now that's contrary to what our council told us.
That's just my opinion. I mean, you
Okay,
can
all
get a
right.
legal opinion on it,
All right,
because neither of us is an attorney.
okay, Wendy?
I'm looking at board, wait, Joe, I'm looking at board committees. No board committee may speak or act for the board except when formally and expressly given such authority for specific and time-limited purposes. Then in 6, board committee expectations and authority will be stated carefully by the board to assure that committee authority will not usurp or conflict with the board's own authority or conflict with the authority delegated to the superintendent. That's under policy 3.2.
Okay, now does that say it has to be word for word what the motion
Don't
says?
answer the question.
It just has to not subvert the will of the board that was passed in the motion. Is that,
Board expectations and authority. But if a motion has been made
And approved.
and approved by the board, then the policy will state
What
what
that
the motion was.
Yeah.
Like we did with the policy on
yeah.
operate, when you made the policy, Mr. Scrivener,
About operating.
about operate or
Operate.
not operate, you made the motion, I got the motion from Robin to make sure I had it exactly right, and then we put it in that policy for you, or for the board, for all of you.
Yeah, but John's question is a legitimate one. I mean, what's the role of the policy committee as opposed to motion and what was passed on board? What's our role? Is our role to exactly copy all the motions that were passed? Then if that's what we're supposed to do, then we're wasting time striking some of this information that was passed already. Or is our role to, relate what legitimately was passed in some form or document? That's the fine point. It appears to me that's the way I understand the argument.
Wendy, would you read it again, please?
Can you tell me what number that is, please?
Yeah, policy 3.2.
I don't think that tells us.
What number is that?
I don't think-
Search policy 3.2.
I know, but you said policy 3.2, but there's one, there's two,
Yeah,
there's
there's a
three.
bunch of them, there's
Right.
actually 9, so we need to look at it very carefully because board committees are not created to direct, oversee staff, that's one. But right here, no board committee may speak or act for the board except when formally and expressly given such authority for specific and time-limited purposes.
Well,
So I would
Go ahead.
interpret that as the board has passed a motion, it has been approved. So that action has to be stated exactly as the board approved it, period. Unless the board says, we'd like you to rework it and make it better or different or whatever you wanna say. Put it codified into policy.
Minimizing the
I honestly
section
think
two.
number two is not like that we passed it, there's something missing in number two, and I don't remember off the top of my head. That's not exactly right, number 8 is not exactly right,
sure that.
they're different, I know.
Rachel, you got Rachel.
Rachel, sorry, Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, I just had a couple suggestions or comments. Number one, I think if we're going to be changing any of the wording that comes from a motion, I think it's our duty, as members on the policy committee to submit to that. With any language changes and changes to the language that we may decide on for the full board to vote on, because we get into the situation of the original intent of the motion being changed. And I'm civil to that personally, so I would like to see if we were thinking of potentially modifying the language away from the original motion, that we provide a fact-based version to the full board to get to vote on, so that we don't diminish what the original intent was of the original motion. And then I also think there's a matter of how we're going to stop these things in the future. I think it would also behoove us to indicate, just like we do with the different, if we're referencing a specific law or statute in our policy, I think we could also reference if it's a motion that was made, we're codifying it now, we should probably, for the record, state, what meeting it was on. So what meeting, put the date and whatnot, so that people can go back to the record and see that intent in the history behind that particular motion.
What did she say? I couldn't quite hear her.
Also, our motions in meetings are not vetted by the in-house counsel. Proposals for wording of policies are. So what if a motion is passed by the board that needs further language to be legal? You're saying you can't have it because the motion didn't have it?
No, I'm saying that legal counsel would come and say the motion was illegal.
Yeah,
The
law
board's
terms.
motion was.
By the way,
illegal.
that's not her job. She's a district counsel. We,
I know that, John, but let's stick to the fundamental difference we have. Can you make a motion to relax a policy? I believe you can. Or to ignore a policy. I don't think you can make a policy to change a motion. That's a Robert's Rules thing, probably. I mean, I don't know how we get a decision, but that's the fundamental difference we're having. I think that a motion is here and a policy is here, and you think it's the other way around. I think that's the fundamental difference we have.
okay, yeah, I'll
So
buy that.
how do we resolve that?
All right.
I can check Robert's Rules and then,
Well,
so we can move on here.
since Robert's rules do not trump our policy, I would propose that we discuss this at the board level on 9 July, if possible, within
We
the,
certainly can, but I don't think, I mean, I think there must be a reference we can use. I don't know if it's Roberts, I'm just assuming Roberts has some guideline about it.
But right here, under your rule, board committee expectations authority, we stated carefully by the board to assure the committee authority will not usurp or conflict with the board's own authority or conflict with the authority delegated to the superintendent.
Right, I don't think that's as direct as
Yeah,
we
you're
can find. I
talking
think we
about
can find
something better.
something.
Well, actually,
that's more direct.
all right. Well, I'm in favor of tabling this then, until we have that discussion and get it sorted out, because we'll likely do something that's gonna have to be changed. You know,
Right.
I agree.
is everybody, is that all right with you, Rachel?
And can you say again what you're like wanting to do?
Table the discussion around new policy requests until we have a board level discussion about whether or not policies have to be word for word with a motion that was previously passed by the board, or does the policy committee vet the language of the motion to make sure that it's appropriate language for codification? That needs to be a board level discussion.
Okay.
And if we try to discuss it without doing that, then we're probably wasting time. Okay? Fair enough?
That's fair enough.
All right. So that means we can go on with,
Continuation of policy review.
We left off with policy 3.4, section 6.
3.46.
So you're under board member code of conduct and you start with section 6.
Roman numeral 6?
Yes,
Okay. Members shall avoid conflicts of interest.
yes.
Okay.
We're in the red packet, Rachel.
I brought the ethics act with me.
Okay, the first thing I'd suggest on that is that we say, shall avoid conflicts of interest as defined by law and ethics commission rules. Okay, because otherwise it gets subjective according to the individual. Is that fair enough?
And they,
Say that again.
It says that eventually, right?
Members shall avoid conflicts of interest as defined by law and South Carolina Ethics Commission
Reform
rules.
Act, okay. Ethics reform.
Comma, and the use of board membership for personal gain or even the appearance of impropriety. That's just a regurgitation of the Ethics Commission rules, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
Ethics Commission, that whole sentence is their purview.
So you need a second sentence then?
A board member should exclude himself from a discussion of votes pertaining to his, her potential conflict of interest in accordance with state law. That sounds fine to me. Yes, David?
I'm not sure the ethics rules deal with the appearance. I'm not sure they do. And that's just as important as we know from our history. The
Yes.
appearance is just as important. And the appearance of a conflict will erode your organization as much as a real one. So I think it'd be good to keep appearance in
I
there.
can't say for certain, but I think the appearance of propriety ended up somewhere in Moss's consent decree.
Oh, it did.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in the
It was
statute.
parenthetical. It said, we don't know that you did it, but you did give the appearance of it. That's all they said.
Okay,
So I would leave appearance in there because it's pretty darn important.
Yeah, well, I think we function, 60% of our activities are
well,
based
you wanna
on
leave it
appearances.
in? Well, so do I.
Oh.
Yeah, because they talk about potential conflicts, they don't say appearance. You're right, Mr. Freeman, you're right.
Okay, I'm glad we fleshed that out.
There's been a terrible accident, John and I have agreed, and we didn't even know it.
Roman numeral 7.
Secretary,
Works for me.
Yeah, and the last line, acceptable use technology. Is that what it says, acceptable use of
Of
technology?
technology-
That's
of
it?
technology
That's the actual
policy.
title of it, okay.
Okay, number 8 has a favorite word. Members shall comport with any and all rules or regulations of the district applicable to board members and with the South Carolina Ethics Reform Act. I'm sure the Ethics Commission will take comfort in us having that policy.
Under their rules of conduct, I'm sure they will.
9, members shall make official visits to schools only upon the knowledge of the principal. Board members shall not unnecessarily interfere with the day-to-day operations of a school or work location or with the work being performed by employees assigned to that school or work location.
That's the one.
I'm
Yeah.
thoroughly in favor of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, and then it's, yeah, and in your board of trustees, visit schools from time to time. Yeah, I think that's being true
Well,
to the
that's not in
principal.
there, is it?
What?
Visiting schools time to time.
No, well, I'm just saying it's in your powers as board members.
I think that's in state statute.
Yeah, it's under state statute, yeah.
Trustees.
It's the only upon knowledge of the principal
That bothers.
is the sticking point. I know that Will doesn't agree with that one.
Will doesn't agree, and I
But
don't
we-
agree with it.
Huh? You don't?
I don't agree with it either. Mainly because if we wanna look at it from a, a point of view where we're trying to learn things and observe things, that, it gives a superficial look when you tell the principal that you're coming.
But if
It
you're
doesn't
making
say advanced knowledge of the principal.
Yeah, it says official visits only upon knowledge.
You can walk in and say, I'm
Oh,
here.
okay, all right, well,
You know, I
go with
think
it
a visit,
I go with it,
I see what you mean.
yeah,
you
I
know,
go with it,
professional
yeah,
courtesy
good
and
point.
communication.
So they may have a
They're
code
te- they might
word
be
though.
testing.
They may have a
Testing.
code word.
That's okay, I don't think they can prepare with a code word, I've been in there, but, a day ahead, when you know that the superintendent or principal or board member's coming. The next, you're a little bit sharper the next day, cause you know that visitor is gonna be coming through the building, but,
Well,
Yeah.
okay, but the principal isn't always there. So, should we have upon knowledge of the principal or the principal's designee, meaning who's in charge of the building when
Like an
the
assistant
principal isn't
principal.
physically
Yeah.
present? I assume that somebody's in charge of the
Yeah.
The OIC,
Huh?
the officer in charge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You need
Okay.
to request permission to come aboard.
Yep,
yes,
sir.
sir,
Even the admiral has to do that.
Yeah,
that's right,
okay.
that's right.
Roman numeral 10.
But it also says official visit, so if you're doing an unofficial visit, apparently,
Like if you're coming,
to deal with Mel's question, if you're just dropping in, that's
see your
not an official
grandchild.
visit.
No.
I don't see how there can be an unofficial visit. But you can't, I don't know, can we,
Yeah, I
I can't
don't,
see.
yeah, I don't know, David.
I'm not,
Why would that be
I'm not here
unofficial?
as a board member.
I'm here as a
Well, what
grandfather.
are you doing here then?
Can't you see my
Do you have any
grandchild?
kids in the school?
Yeah, can you see my
Well, it
grandchild?
could, yeah, I mean, it could be a community member just coming to visit.
Yeah, could be.
You know, it's unofficial, but
We have an
how
AR
can you be,
of our
how can
community
you be
members.
unofficial and you were there observing? And, you know, it just won't be, you know, be disingenuous if you said you're unofficial.
An official visit would imply that it's been approved in advance by the board.
Well, would it? I mean,
No, you don't have to, you don't have, no, you don't,
I'm not advocating that, Will, I'm just saying what it says, okay?
what the policy
It says official visit.
I told,
And
told him
I'm
you
just
don't agree.
trying to
Oh.
articulate what an official visit might mean. I'm not advocating
oh, okay,
anything.
okay.
So that has to be clarified. If you're right, then this is fine. If an official visit means, yeah, that you're representing
But
the board is
I do
okay.
think that board members should be able to visit without getting advanced board approval.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
But now, isn't there a policy, or is there a policy that says that we
As
have to
long
visit?
as the
Or
board
is
members
this-
paying
that's
attention
state
to
policy?
Roman numeral 9 and Roman
State
numeral
policy,
10.
right?
What's that one?
That we have to
Okay.
visit the schools in the district.
Let's look at 9 and 10 together. Okay? Members will not attempt to assume personal responsibility for solving operational problems or complaints, and will refer to the superintendent complaints or concerns regarding operational issues. I support that.
I like that, yeah, that's definitely, that's.
Yes,
I think under 9, members shall make official visits to schools really means, official means in your capacity as a board member.
Yeah,
I think unofficial visit would be like if you're gonna go as a grandparent or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think official, you don't have to get it approved by the board, but you're there as a representative, in your representative
Yeah, I'm a
position.
board member
Yeah, exactly.
walking through,
Right,
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
the
I'm not a
grandfather walking
parent,
through.
cause
Right.
I'm a parent, I'm not even observing anything else, I'm there to talk
Yeah,
about
exactly.
what my child is
Yeah.
about, and the country, and you should be unofficial if you're going for a parent or child or something like that. I think, you know, you're automatically unofficially not a board member then.
all right, so
You don't wanna
we're,
exert your power.
all right, so official should stay then, correct?
Mhm, I think so.
All right, and then only upon knowledge of the principal or the
Designated.
person in charge.
Designated,
You
yeah.
said
Principal,
designated.
you said principals
As
designated.
long as that doesn't denote that you need their approval to be there. They have no right to block you
Right.
from coming in.
I don't think they know
Huh?
one way or the other, but.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even though they might want
policy.
to.
You
Yeah.
want to be able to make sure.
Yeah, the policy is
And,
there.
and which one was that, John?
Hmm?
Which one was that?
Number 9. On 3.4. But I think they should know who's in the building, I mean, that's part of it too. You know, it's not
Yeah, they wanna know who's in the building.
Who's in the
But
building.
they also wanna know if
Nobody should be in the building.
members in the building.
Unannounced.
I'd wanna know that
To
from
the
the
front
principal.
desk.
But I mean, if I'm comfortable with where I am, I don't care if I know it a minute ahead, I just wanna know it because maybe assistant principal might escort you to see what you wanna see, or principal might walk around with you, be courteous and, you know,
What you want?
hospitable. But other than that,
That's if you want that. That's
I don't think you need that ahead of time.
Right. But I think that's if you want that, but also, if you're a good principal, then you pretty much know your building, and if your person at the front office is watching and actually doing their job, then before you go there, once you as a board member, once you go there, they will not say before you even get to the front door, because I've seen several times at certain places where, look at that, the principal and everybody who's a radio holder know that board members are coming through those doors, and I've heard it myself on the radio. everyone be advised of board members in the building, so and so. So that's upon, also upon you operating your own building. So I mean, for realistically, you don't need to be, for them to have to tell them, because if they're doing their job, they will see you coming in the front office. Unless
When you
go
were
back
in the
up.
military, did we announce the presence of the post commander, or the post commander just popped
Now,
his head?
anytime there was an officer on deck,
Right,
we announced it loud.
so I don't see anything now with 9 or 10 that
Okay,
warrants
so,
revision. Rachel?
she's still there.
Yeah,
9 or 10, are you okay with both of them?
yep.
Okay. Roman numeral 11. I would like a definition of what undermine is.
In terms of this,
Let's,
I mean,
Is it,
That's a word.
does it mean criticize, is that undermining? Or does it mean that undermining is just that you won't try to subvert
yeah,
or sabotage whatever it is from happening that the board agreed on?
here's the
that's what I
definition.
think.
Okay, their definition.
That's what I think it means.
Yeah.
It means erode the base or foundation, like of a rock formation. Or 2, lessen the effectiveness, power, or ability of especially gradually or insidiously.
Lessen the, say it again,
Lessen the effectiveness, power, or ability of especially gradually or insidiously. So yes, criticism repeatedly absolutely would do that.
Criticism would be what? Part of that?
Yeah,
Part of
lessen
undermine?
the effectiveness, power,
because
ability
you're
of.
gonna do it repeatedly.
Repeatedly.
What comes after especially?
Campaign.
What's the source for that, Doctor?
It says dictionary.
Okay. All right, dictionaries don't trump the First Amendment.
Wait a minute.
As far as I
Let me,
know.
hold on, lessen
But
the
you asked
effectiveness,
for
power,
the
ability of,
definition.
especially, because here, let me see, I'm sorry, I don't write that fast.
So,
There are some synonyms.
so, John, you think this trumps the First Amendment?
Well, I think that undermine can be just too loosely defined. It kind of goes back to the famous statement of deep regret from October 3rd, 2017.
What was that? October 3rd,
A board member
2017.
made a statement to the newspaper and got sanctioned by the board indirectly with a statement of deep regret because the board and their lawyer felt that the statement undermined.
Was that a board decision
Hmm.
that she was undermining? Was it a board decision that was being undermined?
Well, the board decision was that the superintendent was still working.
Is that a board decision, or, I mean, was this just what was happening? And the board decision is when you vote on something specifically, word for word, and then you go back and say, hey, they voted on that, but, and you continue to talk about it in a negative sense. That's undermining. Because we have voted on it and agreed upon it. That's a we thing, and you can't go back after it's been voted on. Now, if it's not
In
voted
a
on,
meeting, you can't.
if it's not
But you
voted,
can walk out into the street and criticize the decision.
not according to this,
Why can't you do
because I think it does undermine what we're trying to do.
That's yes, but that's a norm. That's not behavior. Speech is protected, period.
Okay. Well,
That's my view. It's
Is
just
this-
my opinion.
is
okay?
is this behavior or, or this mostly behavior here, except it's not law? Most of the
First
stuff
Amendment
is behavior, huh?
First
Yeah,
Amendment is law. Political speech in
Merriam-
particular.
What's the
Okay.
Merriam-Webster?
Here's Merriam-Webster's.
Okay.
It is a transitive verb, to subvert or weaken insidiously or secretly try to undermine is in political rivals, to weaken or ruin by degrees.
my question
Wait
is,
a minute, let Wendy finish, okay?
Pretty much, I was trying to find blacks, I was gonna see if it's in black
Black's
slide,
Law.
if it's in black slide, I'm not sure.
well, I personally.
Go right ahead.
Wait a minute, Will,
No,
okay?
y'all go ahead.
I personally, I don't, be honest with you, John, I don't care what, Wendy pulls up on that phone, because the mere fact that, guess what? The definition of undermining, realistically, we all grown. And we all, guess what, elected officials, we don't have the right, the last time I checked, to, basically tell one another what they can or cannot do, or.
That's my point. That's my point.
So therefore, with that notion, I really see no reason of having this. It really should be striking, because I mean, if we can't do that, then what's the point of saying you undermine people? People undermine each other every day at their jobs or in life. People undermine husband and wife undermine each other all the time. So what's the point of having this? And this, I mean, that's just.
In addition,
So, I mean-
it really passes a negative aspersion on the idea of debate and of having opinion.
Yeah.
As though it's a dirty word to criticize. Yes, Rachel?
Can I make a suggestion, please?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to move to strike, Roman numeral 11, the language starting at and. The members will respect decisions of the board, period. Remove the rest of it, and I also would like to move to strike Roman numeral 12. I
Second.
know we're not on that yet, but that's where I'm going.
I'll second that.
Let's vote on it then.
Any discussion?
We already discussed it enough.
All right, we'll vote. All in favor of striking Roman numeral 11 and Roman numeral 12?
No, she didn't say that.
I think she said members will
She
respect
said,
decisions of the
yeah.
board, period, is that right?
Yes.
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 That's correct.
Come again, Rachel?
That's correct. I'd like to keep just, the part of Roman numeral 11 that
First-
says members will
first
respect
7
decisions of the
words.
board, period. The stuff about undermining
Okay.
is
All right.
effective, but
Okay.
I think respect is, something that you should keep in there, and Roman numeral 12 needs to go in its entirety.
Okay, so, all right, the motion before the board then is to change the language of Roman numeral 11 to say that members will respect decisions of the board, end statement, and strike Roman numeral 12 entirely.
That's correct.
Okay. All in favor?
Now, wait a second, I want discussion. I like discussion.
Oh, okay, I thought we had discussion. Okay.
No. So I think that's problematic to strike 12 because, the board is the, boss of the superintendent. And if you're expressing as the boss negative judgments about the superintendent publicly, I'm sure you would be at, some risk or liability of defamation. So I think that's, problematic,
Okay.
for that reason.
I would maintain that the board would be liable if the board expressed
No.
difficulties about it. That's a remarkable turnaround for you, to have that opinion.
What did I ever say publicly?
Pardon me?
You're implying that I've defamed people publicly.
No, defame doesn't come into the position at all. Defame is to besmirch a person's character. When you criticize their performance, you're not attacking their character.
Yes, you might be.
Okay. Again,
Can I give the reason why?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay,
the First Amendment is the First Amendment. Now that excuse me, wait a minute, Rachel, one moment. That is what Ken Childs was selling the board with for years, that anything we say about the superintendent was a contractual problem, all right? I beg to differ. I think that if we are bound not to give our opinion as members and elected officials on the superintendent's performance, then we can't say that the superintendent works for us. The idea of having to wait a whole year in between evaluations to comment on performance is inappropriate.
Rachel?
Here's my opinion on this. So it says members will not publicly express individual negative judgments of superintendent or staff performance. Now, I certainly, as a person, and how I operate, would go and tell the superintendent if I had issues with any staff performance or his own performance. That's how I would operate. I also don't think that it's up to anybody to tell me that I can't do that in another medium. That's my right to be able to speak to someone's performance. Now, right or wrong though, and how people perceive that is one thing, but being bound and said in policy that I will not publicly express individual negative comment is, that's putting a muzzle on my right as an elected official to go out there and have my voice heard if I feel that something is inappropriate.
Point well
I
taken,
certainly
Rachel.
know. I
I'm sorry.
certainly would already have brought those concerns before those individuals. So I don't think it's appropriate for us to be told that we can't express our opinions or judgments. I mean,
I would also like to add that,
it's-
I'm sorry,
let's
Rachel, I
put it in
thought you were
reverse.
done.
Okay, let's put it in the verse to where it said, members will not publicly express individual negative or positive judgments. So why is it only negative judgments that are supposed to be suppressed? So I can go out there and I can say positive things, but I can't say negative things?
Yeah, so
That is selective, decision making on my speech, and that's inappropriate.
I totally agree with that.
I'd also like to point out that policy 2.2, section D, states that the board will not be bound by any statements or actions by individuals that have not been sanctioned by the board. So if the board cannot be bound by what you say, how can we possibly say that the person commits an offense by saying it?
There's not a keyword publicly there.
Anything's public if you,
Well, I think when they say publicly here, they mean you're speaking from the standpoint of a board member, a member of the board. You're speaking for the board.
if a member of the, no, you're not, if you're
Well,
saying
you're
you're not
speaking-
speaking for the board,
Well, if that's the case, then what's the rule with the referendum?
that's not apples and apples.
It is apples and apples, because, I mean, you can't speak publicly about the referendum?
The ethics, you can't speak publicly about the referendum because it's an ethics commission campaign rule. That has nothing to do,
No, actually, no, he's right. No, that actually, that's not true because you can speak about the referendum, but you can't tell nobody how to vote for the referendum when you're on school campus or when you have in the form of an email from your district phone, from your district
Right.
computer. So that's totally different.
I mean,
You can write-
that's publicly pro and con about the board decision in my mind, though. I'm not talking about
You can
just
write-
the referendum, I'm talking about being able to speak publicly about that particular part of
You
the
can-
board.
you can
How
write,
it works.
as long as you don't use a government resource.
Yeah, that's true.
You can write to the editor of the IP and say, don't vote for this referendum.
Yeah,
You can do that.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can-
So-
yeah.
It's,
So if that
it's
be
a
the
very
case,
weak
yeah.
argument to say,
Yeah.
I agree with Rachel totally. No one should tell, I won't tell my Fred Bennett story, but Fred was an activist who got himself elected to the board. And before that, he was the biggest pain in the rear end that you could imagine. And he got on the board and he was still the biggest pain in the rear. And the people on the board said, we want to stifle him. And I said, you can't. You can't. We have no control over each other. You can hope that they don't say it, but you can't stop them from saying it. That's what the First Amendment is all about.
Okay, let's move on.
That's
All right, we're gonna go.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts, Wendy? I mean, just philosophically. So we can give any kind of job performance review on the street? And that's, I guess that's one way of looking, and I, you
Officially,
know,
I mean, can I stand up in a meeting, I'm representing the board?
right.
I'm gonna do a board, refresher to my constituency, and I'll tell them directly that I don't like the performance of the superintendent A, B, C, D, and I don't like, and I'm not sure, we're not, you know, they're setting themselves up for a suit. I'm not sure that the superintendent wouldn't be saying, look, you publicly disparaged me, and I you know, I'm gonna sue.
Well, I mean, but that's not.
I mean, that's why I think publicly is an important term now.
But who are we to put them off on people? I mean,
I don't think, yeah.
I mean, but that's what that is, and especially when we're just saying you can say the positive thing, but you can't say anything negative. I mean, I may get up in front of me, I may say I don't like the superintendent's pros, or I don't like how he's saying that. That's my right to say that. But now if I get up and speak about his evaluation and talk about his character, then that's something totally different than of disagreement, not liking his ways. And some people say that to be a negative confrontation. So that's I don't
I think publicly you represent.
What's public? If a member of the
Exactly.
county council calls me up on the phone and says, what do you think of this decision the superintendent make? Is that a
That's not
public?
public, no, that's private.
That's public.
No, public is
Public.
when you're doing something because you're a board member.
Well, why do you
In
think
this
the guy
case.
from the county council called you?
Well, no, it's calling privately.
Yes, David.
The attorneys at the school board association put that
Yeah.
red line stuff in there, I'm sure they did it for a reason. But my feeling on that is as long as the board has no liability for something an individual board member says, if they say they don't like the performance of the superintendent, if the superintendent can only sue them and not sue the board for not having a policy,
That's exactly.
I'm comfortable.
Okay, Wendy, you were gonna check on that from last
Exactly
meeting.
right.
And I have not,
Electronics.
yeah, yeah, and I need to be able to spend more time on this, because I will tell you that there was a lawsuit that was just filed in Anderson too, and it had to do with what some individual said, but these people, the board members sued the board and individuals. So, you know, I don't really know the substance of the suit, but I think that we need
Just wanna
to.
know we're not liable because we don't have a policy.
You didn't, each person's responsible for what they're saying, because you don't have the authority to speak for the board.
Right.
However, Rachel said something that I think is very important, and that is that out of respect for each other and for the superintendent, if you have a personnel issue with the superintendent, professional courtesy and respect, he is your employee, then I would hope that you would speak to him in private about what his deficiencies were or what your concerns were, and give him an
That's up to you.
opportunity. Can I
That's up
just,
to you.
just
I mean, you
a
better
minute?
talk.
I agree.
Can I finish my sentence? I just wanna say this, that when there are human resource issues, when there are problems with an employee, an employee needs to work on something, or there's an issue, that, you know, the privacy of that person is respected, and you speak to that employee, whatever the sanction is, whether they're gonna be, you know, suspended or whatever, you try to help that person improve or correct their deficiency. So, in all my experience in employment law is you respect confidentiality, and you do not, you're very careful about what you say and what you do, because, you know, the person, we all have right, everybody has rights, so we have to be so careful about how we handle ourselves. If there is a negative judgment, then it needs to be discussed. I think with the staff, I think y'all are supposed to bring it to the superintendent, if you have an issue with staff, I think that's in the policy too.
It's not a judgment, it's an
Exactly.
opinion.
It's right, exactly.
It's an
Okay.
opinion, and that's the big difference. Wait a minute, Rachel, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The superintendent is not your everyday run-of-the-mill employee. The superintendent is a public official, a public figure
Yeah,
involved in the business of the public.
right.
So we have every right, in fact, a responsibility,
Right.
I think, to tell our constituents what we think about what's going on. So you can't apply the same logic. Your logic is correct if we were talking about a department head or something like that, okay? But the superintendent is placed in a very unique position. that we are not, we're not answerable to each other, we're answerable to the people who elected us to office. And therefore, if we don't think the superintendent made a good decision, we have every right to tell the people that we don't think he made
Well,
a
what
good
would you tell
decision.
him?
Pardon me?
What would you tell him? I mean, what right does he
They're
have
not
to be
mutually
informed by you?
exclusive.
But
They're
I
not
mean,
mutual.
but if you were unhappy with the decision, then wouldn't you go to him?
You could,
But
Wouldn't
you can
wouldn't
do both. You can
Exactly,
do both. They're not
exactly,
mutually exclusive.
exactly. And at this point in time, the way how it's coming across, being that she works for the superintendent, then I don't think we should be having this conversation with her, because I think it could be some conflict there. So with Wendy working for the superintendent, and that's asking her to do this, 'cause it could be a bit of a conflict, because rightfully so, she does not work for the board. She really needs to work for the superintendent. So I don't think we should push that upon her to do.
And I work for the
that's just-
district, but
right,
I always
right.
want to do everything I can for.
Right, I mean,
them.
right,
I
but-
don't feel like I'm separate from it, but I appreciate you
Yeah,
saying
I
that,
just-
Lynn,
yeah,
because
yeah.
I wanna make sure I
Yeah.
do what's right for you all.
Rachel, you were next.
But Rachel, you were gonna say something.
So I understand that there may be concerns about the issue of any members making comments about confidential personnel matters. So I certainly would be open to amending this to where section or Roman numeral 12 still highlights that, but I don't want it to say anything that has to do with judgment. Just simply, it could be, members agree to abide by, HR rules regarding confidential personnel matters when appropriate and important. So keeping the red line and just saying that we will abide by rules regarding keeping personnel matters confidential and also compliant.
Yeah, Rachel, I think that's very good, because here's an example of something I'll give you from many years ago. Okay, there was an individual, this is not here, there was an individual who was, a very outstanding physician, okay, outstanding. And he had to have surgery, and he got addicted to pain medicine, and it was terrible. And he had a wonderful family, didn't have a history of this, and he went in to a treatment facility and was there for a long time. And he got out, and he was able to rehabilitate from this. Now, if that had gotten out, that someone, so-and-so this and that, he would have been destroyed. So it was a disease, so under the ADA, that had to be all confidential, like that could never be disclosed,
Of course,
so
of
that's why that
course.
person.
But what we're talking about is public policy decisions that the superintendent makes. His job performance, not his health.
But-
It's nothing different than David saying that he thinks the superintendent made a whopping mistake in closing Islands Academy. What's the difference?
No,
He had every right to say
But it
that.
talks about superintendent
said it was illegal.
performance, no, student.
Not a mistake.
Superintendent
I didn't agree with it,
performance.
but he had every right to say it.
But it would affect the superintendent's performance if he had that problem, so that's why what Rachel said about the personnel matters in HR, that protects
Well, of
that.
course, that we're bound by law not to reveal,
Right.
Right.
but we have every right, as long as it doesn't violate what is otherwise confidential by law.
Yeah, that's why that needs to be in there.
All right, and don't forget, this sounds like it was written by the superintendent.
And actually, I was gonna actually, Rachel, could you read your motion, because I really think that this should be striking, due to the fact that, the same way how the superintendent is kind of a public official, we're public officials too, so therefore, does the superintendent have something in his clause that says that he shouldn't talk about board members publicly? Do he have, because the same way, the same way it goes for us is be the same way it goes for him. So if he doesn't have anything in his policy or a clause that say that he can't talk about board members publicly, if he don't like a decision they tell him, then why in the heck should we be bound and mugged? Because that's how I see this right here.
It couldn't have gotten his contract, because it would have been illegal to put it in the contract. You can't, the concept is called prior restraint.
Right, and
You
that.
can't tell people in advance
what to
what
say.
they cannot
They
say.
can't- exactly, so therefore I got a
Unless
problem
what they
with that.
wanna say would violate some other law.
Can
like FERPA.
Right.
Yeah.
We're talking about policy 3.4, which is about board member code of conduct.
Right.
So,
And,
if we can get there at a different place or a different time, but I'm gonna try to keep us on track here.
right, but also, right,
Thank you.
and I get that, Rachel, but what I'm saying, my question to you in regards to what we're talking about is this is and as simple as this. My mama told me what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So in saying that, if there is no policy that that reverses with the superintendent and board members, why are we making a policy for board members and the superintendent? When by law, it's nothing you can do to a board member. Or if he said something that is confidential, then that is breaking the law. Then that's something different. You can sue him. But Alvin going and saying a negative judgment, that is nothing out there that says that a board member can't do that. I mean, period.
Everybody likes free speech until they don't agree with what was said.
About them, right?
There's one difference, we're elected official, superintendent is our employee,
So should I take this?
it's a little different.
That's a big difference.
Trying to
No,
get-
it's not, because if he comes in and speak against us, we still are his superiors in terms of the hierarchy.
A principal board just mauled the board at the last board meeting. I ain't had no board member say anything about it. The principal board just mauled the whole board and didn't nobody say nothing about it. So I said a principal came to the last board meeting and she mauled the whole board upon a decision that we made about getting rid of the coaches. And didn't nobody say nothing about the principal mauling the board publicly. And I wasn't in my seat. If I was in my seat, I would have said something. No one, no other board member said anything about the principal when she came up there for her 3 minutes and she mauled the board.
Can't respond,
That
we
wasn't
can't
the time to
respond,
say it, man.
we can't respond to a public comment.
No, you can't respond, but you can say, ma'am, that's it.
No, that's
You
responding.
can cut it off. You can cut it off because you feel she's being violated. So as a board, you have that right.
No, the presiding officer is the only one who.
Well, the chair could, but she didn't.
Let me say a sentence, okay?
Go ahead.
The presiding officer is the only one who can say anything to a public commenter.
Right, and she didn't, right? That's my point. All right, thank you.
Well, you were saying that we all should have hopped on it.
Yeah, top one, you can just say, chair, I think point of order. That's all you had to say. You had to say it to the person, or you say, chair, point of order. And then
But
she
it
would
was
say
within the
it.
purview of the board, you gotta watch what she had every right to say it, was it a
Yeah,
smart
say
thing
what
on
she
her
said.
part? No, I don't think
It
it was
was a
smart.
right to free speech.
You know, it was a right to free speech.
I happen to think that it's very poor form for a principal to get up and lobby the board for, but if that principal is a resident of the county, they got every right to get up and tell us, as long as it's within the purview of the board. If they don't live in the county, then they are violating chain of
She
command.
lives in Bluffton.
Huh?
She lives in Bluffton.
Oh, okay. So she had every
She had
right.
every right, exactly. I thought it was terrible personally, but she
Yeah,
had every right to do
I
it.
thought it was
You got,
terrible too.
I've been asked to resign 5 times
Keep talking.
in public
How
comment.
about that Buffy Snyder when she attacked you?
Well, she's done 3 of the 5.
I mean, remember that day?
5 times you've been
I
attacked.
mean, it was pretty.
All right,
You gotta sit there and take it.
Let's go.
All right, let's vote.
Amen.
We got a new motion?
All right, I'm gonna read what I think is the motion. Correct me if I'm wrong. Members will respect decisions of the board.
Period.
Members will, and strike out 12 altogether. Any further discussion?
No, that's not what Rachel said.
That's not what she
So
said.
Rachel, say what you said again, please.
Did she amend her
For 12.
motion?
Okay.
For 12,
Was it seconded?
look, she was trying to say.
Correct, numbers will respect decisions of the board, period. And then 12, members will
Abide
abide by, each rule, or, I don't know what that will be.
District
The
HR.
members will abide by,
Members of the board shall, and as, go on there. I think that's,
Wait, Rachel, we're trying to hear you. That's okay. Okay.
if she wants to serve,
Will,
she
Will,
will.
Let her
Will,
finish, let her
please,
finish.
please. Let them do their work.
No, let her do her work.
Yeah.
What?
can y'all
Rachel.
hear me?
Yeah, we're trying to hear you.
We're excited.
Okay, sorry. members will abide by confidential, well, I'm trying to say, I want to keep all the rest stuff, but I want to say that we will, I don't know if that's the HR rule.
District
Or-
administrative regulation, human resources, right, district human resources administrative regulations, that's what they are, district human
Well, but why can't we just go by the code?
HR, wait. Human
That's my right, John.
Would you please?
No, I'm not, because I'm asking her a question. I'm asking her, why can't we just say what she
She's got
just
the
said?
floor, Will.
And I'm asking her a question, John.
You can't ask a question if she's got the floor. Now let her talk to Wendy and then you can ask her her question, okay?
Try again, Rachel.
So, okay. Let me think for a second. Members will. We could just say members will respect confidential personnel matters when appropriate and enforcement of South Carolina FOIA and code, blah, blah, blah.
Thank you.
So we say we're gonna respect the confidentiality of personnel matters and we're gonna act in compliance with code and, FOIA.
Got it.
Doesn't talk about anything that has to do with negative judgments or any type of judgments,
Right,
that
right,
anything
that's
that's confidential, we're gonna respect that.
Okay, members.
Would you read that,
okay.
please?
Members will respect confidential personnel matters when appropriate and in accordance with the South Carolina FOIA, SC blah, 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 blah. Is that,
So it says nothing about not expressing individual
Exactly.
negative judgments about the
Right.
superintendent. I will second that.
alright.
Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor? Rachel?
Yes,
Okay, passes unanimously.
Thank you, Rachel.
Moving right along. Roman numeral 13, members may request information from the superintendent. If the information sought does not exist and must be created or developed, or if responding to the information will take substantial staff time, then the superintendent shall notify the board of the request such that the board chair may determine whether the superintendent or his or her designee shall respond to the request. All information provided pursuant to this paragraph shall be provided to all board members. That has a checkered history,
What's
Is
the
it a
history?
good policy or not?
huh?
Is it a good policy or not?
No.
All right, how do we
My
fix it?
opinion is no.
Why
It was
not?
abused terribly.
What's the history?
Different members got different price quotes on, different members had to resort to FOIA requests to get the information, and they were given different quotes as to what it would cost. The then chair, okay, was very,
Folks for what?
was very arbitrary about approving requests. I don't think it's the purview of the chair to be the funnel or the gatekeeper to the superintendent in requests for information. The superintendent should be able to deal with the individual board member, and if there's a problem, work it out.
I agree with that.
Everybody has to be informed, any information shall be provided to all board members.
And that's just as a matter of position, not who's in it, okay?
The superintendent shall notify the board of the request.
So that means the board
Such that the
gets
board
to
shall
veto
determine.
requests for some people, and other people's requests skate right through. It's subjective as all get out.
Well,
It says
why
superintendent
you
shall
think
notify
so?
the board.
Give me why you think what you just said. You said that means, the board's voting on it all, basically giving an opinion on it, right? So it's not skating through, it's people, board deciding that we don't need that request.
What if the member needs it to do their job? Research.
If the board look at it, their job is not whatever their job is. The board decides it's not important enough to get that information. The board decides that, not the.
That is groupthink.
Well, because that, what happens otherwise, John, look at the other way around in that.
Tell, can you elaborate another way around?
The other way around, and if people request what they want, and the board never sees it because it never comes back to the board, and those people are on an individual, a silo, as you put it, approach.
Well, let's say that a member suspects an irregularity in the procurement process.
Bring it to the board.
Members should have to come to the board and get approval for the
If they
documentation.
suspect it,
Let me
yeah.
finish, please. Should the member have to come to the board and get approval for the member to get information to prove or disprove whether there's suspicion of wrongdoing in the procurement process? That means you gotta try the case in public without having any
No.
information. Yeah, there's,
No,
tell me
you're
how you
asking-
could do it procedurally.
or you're asking for the information because you suspect. It's a general thing, and if we say, okay, if you suspect it, go ahead, let's go ahead and get it. But if you're gonna go directly on your own, suspecting and asking for these things, it's like troubleshooting without our approval, in my mind.
History has not proven that the board would react that way.
Well, it was should reactivity, that's why we're doing these policies.
Yes.
So I think the intent of this is to really not, we don't want, a single board member say, produce 5,000, the following 5,000 documents.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, that's the intent.
Correct,
So
yes.
there must be another way to,
That's the way.
wordsmith it, so, because the superintendent has work to do, I mean, and so I think the requests for the information he's providing have to be, have that in consideration, and yes, you can ask for any document you want, but, he can't spend all his time producing documents for board members, I mean, that's just,
And I don't think the situation exists where anybody tries to occupy somebody's 100% of their work time creating, I mean, it's the extreme example of a what if. Not your statement, the idea that we tie people's hands up. Most of the requests for information that I know of, or have made, or know that have been made, questions that should be on the fingertips, or very near to the fingertips of the person who was asked the question. And if they had decent software, they could produce it in a flash.
Cost some more money in the
Okay.
budget.
And that should not,
Jesus, so bad.
I have a second comment too, I've never been asked to determine whether he should respond to the request or not, so that seems a little,
right,
never.
No,
right, and I'm not, and that's why I said, it's not
But the
because of who's
intent
in the position.
Is,
It's should the chairperson have that authority, because you know as well as I, that other chairs have abused that and bottled up people's requests for information because they didn't like that person, or because they didn't want that topic explored by.
Yeah, I understand that, take the board chair out of there, then, but I mean, if you, here's what I'm noticing, I'm noticing a lot of requests going underneath the superintendent, directly to staff.
Well, that's the superintendent's fault, if they shouldn't be going. The superintendent has every right to say, that person does not work for you, that person works for me, go through me. The superintendent has chosen to let us, that happened in the very first meeting last July, the superintendent chose direct access to his staff members. He said it was okay, that's the way
He
he
said it was
wanted it.
okay to go directly.
Yeah.
But we know, as board members, we know the policy should go directly to the superintendent, so
And there is a
we
policy.
decide now to
There
go
is a
along.
there is a policy.
We decide to go along with breaking the policy.
Oh, golly.
I mean, that's what I'm thinking. If there is a policy, then we definitely should follow it. And we can't ask the superintendent to follow it, and you're saying it's his fault.
But he has he delegated it to the superintendent or his designee. He delegated the authority to answer questions to Tanya Crosby, to Robert Otting, to Wendy Cartledge.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what, that's right.
As long as he was
So-
copied.
What's the
As long as he
problem?
was copied, okay. I don't see that.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Okay. Along the lines of, first off, just to be straight honest, when you make this right here, I think is not only is it wrong, but it gives a false statement. And what the false statement is that the superintendent, I mean that the chairman has more authority. And not about who the chair has more authority than the board. And that also creates a toxic relationship between the chair and the board. Because the superintendent is telling the chairman one thing and telling the board members another thing, then you have a toxic relationship going on and you have two different understandings going on. First off, when I send out every one of my emails, I CC BOE, everyone on the board. I never send single-handedly probably email unless to another board member or something of that nature. So therefore, all information should be privy to everyone. And also everything can be forwarded. So therefore, it is not wrong to ask the superintendent something, and he should respond back within a certain amount of days or whatnot. But also, you should not have to go to the chair and ask the chair anything because you are an elected official. So doing that, you have already taken the authority of a person being an elected official, and once again, that is not right because you do not have that right. So therefore, this right here pretty much is basically what's the word that we said we talking about striking out earlier? They're undermining members, saying that you can't talk directly to the superintendent, you come talk to me. That's undermining. So that's my opinion on that.
As Dr. Watts said, it hasn't happened. So this is a wordy statement about an extreme what if, right? So
And the whole thing is to be striking.
I would ask everybody to try to think of a streamlined, succinct way to explain that requests for information should not be from idle curiosity. They should have a purpose. The superintendent has the right to ask what the purpose is, okay? And if there's a problem delivering to the person, the superintendent contacts the board member and explains what the issue is, and they work something out. I don't think it has to come to the board level or to the chair, myself.
No, it don't have to come to the board. I think he needs to copy it to the board as soon as that request is made.
Exactly.
Because I think we can be prepared for whatever that agenda is.
Yeah.
And we don't have to vote on it now, but if we're ahead of the curve, when it does come to us, we'll vote on whatever was being looked at.
Okay, so for next time, if there is a next time, can we have
When
a,
is there next time?
can we think about what better wording would be, okay?
So you got
Dr. Claus has an extended,
No, we're gonna table it
Dr.
until
Claus, you have an extended amount of time?
I extended you,
stereo,
Well,
we're gonna revisit it at the next meeting, if there is a next meeting.
Right, well, I'm asking you to tell me why would you revisit it when, based upon what I just said. I think that's enough information. Unless the committee have another real reason why there's needed.
Because I want Rachel's input and Mel's input on what they think the appropriate language is.
Simplify the language there.
Simplify the language, that's all.
You got a line?
Yeah. Members of the board should request information from the superintendent. Simple.
No, it's not quite that simple, Will. Okay, that's my opinion. I believe that's the will of the committee.
All right.
We are-
You're right. I'm not gonna.
7:03, good.
What you were saying, Doc, about our time?
well,
So when do I
If we have
schedule?
extended our time.
yeah, I have twice, but I think the second, right, 2 or 3 times, however many times, but I think we've done 32 30-day extensions. So, I was looking here to see how much more you have to go through this policy. You've got, let's say,
Got section
You gotta go
4.
to the blank
oh, the black.
also too, because that's a combination. So
So
we're
what
on
is
this.
it?
All I'm trying to do is to get, you know,
So, code of conduct, so, we're on to 3.4.
We
3.4, so you
we've
have,
got maybe 3 more weeks. 3 more
5
weeks.
weeks.
and then we got 3
6.
readings to go through.
Well, and in August, we have more board meetings, because we got 2 regular board meetings, plus we have the,
work session.
exactly. So that would be a good time to read it, so let's
What,
say.
the workshop? The
No,
August
work
In
session.
August, yeah, in August, so.
The August workshop. So why don't you give us until the August workshop to wrap it up?
Work session. That was
Work
the
session.
same,
Will
right?
you do it by then? That's my question.
That's the question too.
Right.
It'll be tight, but I know we can get that done if we don't debate some of these things that probably should be rubber stamped.
Yeah.
I don't think,
Yeah, so
Here.
that seems reasonable.
Too much?
Well, it's not even, it's about 6 weeks,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, cause, you know, well, we need to get it done as we
the
go.
history was, let's go back to the document, the, School Board Association. So we started to go through it, and it was like, without casting aspersions on an ethnic race, it was like Chinese water torture going through each thing, and the board finally gave up, all right? So, I think that if we
Yeah,
present,
Nobody, no.
if we can present a
Yeah.
completed policy manual to get to the board in advance of a meeting at which we have a first reading, then I think we'd be well on our way to getting it wrapped.
so what do you think about, so you're gonna do it, I think it's kinda hard to present the whole
When's
thing.
the August
Don't you?
work
I
session?
mean, you can just say, here it is.
The August work session is the 16th and 17th.
Meeting just
Okay.
for that.
You think so? Yeah, I do too.
The work session's the middle of August, okay?
Yeah.
What if we deliver a manual, proposed manual to the board 1 August? That gives board members 2 weeks.
That's a good idea. Alright, I'll do that, because
Okay.
that gives you
Is that the
30 more
one with-
days.
So you get 30 days,
You got
present
30
them with
more
the
days,
changes that we have made.
But I think, that- yeah, I think it's only fair. to
30 more
board
days, and
members
we issue
to
the
see
report, and then we deal with the report at the work session.
A report, or you mean the manual?
Yeah,
The changes.
Yeah.
When
Right.
when you say manual, you're talking about the changes that this
Correct.
So
committee
you're
has
gonna,
put together.
you're gonna
Right.
present it so you
So all
can
the
see.
things in the blues that we
Yeah,
continue
they
adding all the
get a chance
changes in the
to,
blues.
they get a chance to read it, yeah.
I don't understand why the committee has to go through the 3 readings. Then we make the changes right there, we say, we want this changed, and then there's a vote, and it's changed. That seems admin, I mean, based on my history,
Yeah,
the 3 readings are like an administrative thing. The board says, we, cut that, they vote on it, then,
so you're saying not doing it on 3 different days?
I don't think you need that.
all right.
What does Robert
Day
Rules
1
say?
of the workshop, day 2 of the workshop, and then the second meeting of August.
But what does Robert Rules say? What does the Robert Rules of Order say?
There's no Robert's rules around how we adopt policy. All that Robert's rules will say is how to do a motion to adopt.
So Rachel, do you have any comments about that?
Nope,
Do you think that's doable? Did you hear that?
I think so, yeah. I think that's fine.
And Mel, you're on board with that?
Yeah, I'm on board with it until it doesn't.
So you're gonna be done July 31, because you have to give the modified, or the revised policy manual to the board members August 1. Those are the
Right.
dates we've agreed
Right.
on?
And I'm looking ahead in policy 3.10, teacher dismissal hearing process and powers and duties of hearing officer. Yeah, this is pretty much up to date already, because you all have that administrative reg. Remember, we appointed the.
So there's some of the things-
Yeah,
Some of it's already done.
yeah.
Okay.
What it also has to be considered is that after that action's taken to adopt or not adopt the revised manual, is that the committee stops its regular meetings, but when another committee comes to the board and gets board approval to send a topic for discussion about policy, that we can meet to do that. So maybe meet once every 2-3 months.
Okay.
Because then you're gonna, if you don't, the only problem is that you get into this group discussion of 11 people, all wordsmithing, and then you get the camel that was developed by a committee that looked nothing like a camel.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna think about it, I understand, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so the committee would go into recess, okay? And then if the need arose, we could call a meeting, but there'd be no regularly scheduled meetings.
Right, we first have to decide what we discussed at the beginning is how is
Yeah,
our new policy
that's
gonna
right.
be presented.
That's right. So, yeah, so that's
He's going to.
question should be
Okay.
discussed later. Robin, thank you.
Policy.
I would